Matthew 15:32. I have compassion on the multitude. Here a miracle is related not unlike another which we have lately explained. The only difference is, that on the former occasion Christ satisfied 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, while, on the present occasion, 4,000 men are fed with 7 loaves and a few small fishes, and that 12 baskets were then filled with fragments, while out of a greater abundance a smaller portion is left. Let us learn from this, that the power of God is not restricted to means or outward assistance, and that it is all one with him whether there be much or little, as Jonathan said when speaking of his own moderate army and the vast multitude of enemies. There is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few, 1 Samuel 14:6. As the blessing of God can make one loaf suffice as well as 20 for satisfying a great multitude, so, if that be wanting, 100 loaves will not be a sufficient meal for 10 men, for when the staff of bread is broken, Leviticus 26 hours 26 minutes, though the flour should come in full weight from the mill, and the bread from the oven, it will serve no purpose to stuff the belly. The 3 days fasting, of which Christ speaks, must not be understood to mean that they had eaten nothing for 3 days, but that in desert places they had few conveniences, and must have wanted their ordinary food. Besides, in those warm countries, hunger is less keen than in our thick and cold atmosphere, and, therefore, we need not wonder that they should abstain longer from food. 33. And when he had taken him aside from the multitude, this was done, partly to afford to those who were ignorant, and not yet sufficiently qualified for becoming witnesses, an opportunity of perceiving at a distance the glory of his divine nature, and partly that he might have a better opportunity of pouring out earnest prayer. When he looked up to heaven and sighed, it was an expression of strong feeling, and this enables us to perceive the vehemence of his love towards men, for whose miseries he feels so much compassion. Nor can it be doubted, that by conveying the spittle from his own mouth to the mouth of another, and by putting his fingers into his ears, he intended to manifest and express the same feeling of kindness. Yet that he has supreme power to remove all our defects, and restore us to health, is proclaimed by him when he simply orders the tongue and ears to be opened, for it was not without a good reason that Mark inserted that Chaldaic word, Ephatha, be opened, but to testify the divine power of Christ. Among other fooleries with which baptism has been debased by foolish men, the ceremony used by our Lord is turned into a piece of buffoonery, and this instance shows us that there is no end to licentiousness, when men wantonly change at their own pleasure the mysteries of God. 33. Whence shall we obtain so many loaves in a solitary place? The disciples manifest excessive stupidity in not remembering, at least, that earlier proof of the power and grace of Christ, which they might have applied to the case in hand. As if they had never seen anything of the same sort, they forget to apply to him for relief. There is not a day on which a similar indifference does not steal upon us, and we ought to be the more careful not to allow our minds to be drawn away from the contemplation of divine benefits, that the experience of the past may lead us to expect for the future the same assistance which God has already on one or more occasions bestowed upon us. 36. Then he enjoined them not to tell it to any person. Many commentators torture these injunctions to an opposite meaning, as if Christ had purposely excited them to spread abroad the fame of the miracle, but I prefer a more natural interpretation which I have formerly stated, that Christ only intended to delay the publication of it till a more proper and convenient time. I have no doubt, therefore, that their zeal was unseasonable, when, though enjoined to be silent, they were in haste to speak. We need not wonder that men unaccustomed to the doctrine of Christ are carried away by immoderate zeal, when it is not called for. Yet what they unwisely attempted to do, was made by Christ to promote his own glory, for not only was the miracle made known, but the whole of that district, in despising the author of heavenly gifts, was rendered inexcusable. 37. He hath done all things well. Matthew, after collecting many miracles, concludes by saying that the multitudes wondered, and glorified the God of Israel, that is, because God, taking unusual methods of illustrating his power, had called up the remembrance of his covenant. But the words of Mark contain perhaps an implied contrast, for the reports concerning Christ were various, and the word multitude or crowd, oklos, may be intended to mean that it was only wicked and malicious persons who slandered his actions, since all that he did was so far from exposing him to calumny that it deserved the highest praise. But we know, and it is what nature teaches us, that nothing is more unjust than to make the bestowal of favors an occasion of envy and ill will.